My talk is going to be about Kachina dolls. Most people in California are not aware of the Kachina dolls. Kachina carving is a native art unique among the Pueblo Indians of the Southwest. The Hopi have the most elaborate dance ceremonies and also carve the largest number of dolls. I first became interested in Kachina carving when I was traveling in Arizona and New Mexico during my work, and there I visited many shops, museums, and villages and saw Kachina dolls, and as a consequence bought books to read about them. In reading about them and doing more research into Kachinas, I discovered that they were carved from cottonwood roots. When I lived in Colorado, there were many lakes and rivers where the cottonwoods grew, and I'd find these roots exposed along the shoreline. And so I started cutting them off, and then during the cold winter months, when it was snowy and you couldn't do things outdoor, I would carve Kachina dolls, and over the years I've carved probably in excess of 40 different Kachina dolls. The Hopi who do the carving, I need to give you some information on them. They live in Pueblo Village, perched high upon 3 windswept mesas in northern Arizona that overlook the Little Colorado River and the Peta Desert. To the west tower the peaks of the San Francisco Mountains, which, according to Hopi legends, is the home of the Kachinas. Hopi have always been village dwellers and farmers, and one of their oldest pueblos, Oriabi, was an ancient village when the Spanish explorers came through the area in 1540. The land where the Hopi live is a region of rocky mesas and sandy valleys. It ranges from 4,500 to 8,500 feet elevation. Water is scarce, and crops are watered by seepage from springs and the midwinter rains. Each village also has one or more kivas, or underground ceremonial rooms, where the Hopi men perform the Kachina ceremonies during the cold winter months. The Kachina season begins in December and continues through July of the next year. In essence, the Kachinas are supernatural beings or spirits who visit the Hopi villages during the first half of every year to aid them in the securing a good harvest. The total number of Kachinas exceeds 250. The dances and ceremonies are carried out by men of the tribe, wearing costumes and masks believed to represent the various Kachina spirits. The first Kachinas to appear each year are the chiefs in connection with the winter solstice rites. Throughout the Kachina season, other dancers appear in a given program. There may be as many as 30 different performers. An authentic Kachina doll is a miniature representative of a costume performer. Prior to the Kachina ceremony, the uncles and fathers of the children are busy making dolls in the likeness of the performers. The Kachina dolls are then given to the children by the dancers during the ceremonies. The children take them home and hang them from the ceiling or rafters with strings. And this is a way for them to learn about the Kachina spirits. They are not considered toys, but are formed at an educational form. Now, the Hopi don't really classify the Kachinas, but they do fall into groups. Here we have the group of chief Kachinas. This little white Kachina here, which is carved in the traditional size, they're about 6 inches tall, is Iatoto, and he's the chief of all the Kachinas. And over here to his left, or his right, to you, is a holy. A holy is the chief's lieutenant, And their function is primarily to ensure that the crops have water, and that is one of their important functions. And they are in charge of all the other kachinas. The 4 kachinas are the runner kachinas. And the runners take part in the races that are held in the Kachina villages. And what they do is they run along with the racers, which are the villagers. And then if the racer loses, then they, well, like in the case of Chusmok Tuka, who is the stick runner, he carries these sticks and he throws them at the losers. In this case here, Palavit Kuna, he is the called the red kilt runner, and he has these 2 switches which he switches them with. Now this Kachina over here is Mataya, and he's called the hand pot carrier, and he also is a runner, but he generally carries switches also, and if they lose then he chases them. Now this little one here is Quitanona, and he's called the dung throwing Kachina, and he also is a runner, but if he catches them then he puts a handful of dung or manure in their mouths if he catches them. Otherwise they give them pika bread if they complete the race and without being beaten by a runner. 3 dolls that we are showing here are the women dolls. And the most important of the women dolls is Crow Mother, or Angushka Somataka. She is the mother of all the Kachinas. And she also carries whips here that when the children misbehave, she uses them on them. Now over to the right of her are 2 Kachinas that are named Polikmana, or Butterfly Girl. There are 2 different types that are carved in different mesas. The 3rd mesa is carved like this, but generally in most of the Hopi villages it's carved in this manner here. And she is merely a dancer, and she did not perform during the Kachina ceremonies, but during the social dances during the other part of the year, during the summer months of the year. The Kachinas that we have on display now are examples of plant Kachinas. There are many plant Kachinas, but these 2 are ones that I have carved. And here we have the Chokchina, who is called the Cocklebur Kachina. And he is also a runner, and but when he runs with the villagers, and if he catches them, he sticks cockleburs in their hair. Over to the right of him, we have Kai, who's a corn dancer. And the corn dancer is very important to Kachinas because corn has always been one of their staple crops. And you'll notice in his hand here, he carries blue corn, which is the traditional corn that the Hopi always used to grow. The Kachinas we are looking at now are in the bird group of Kachinas. Over here on the left is Takshika, who is a quail Kachina, and he carries a rattle and a small wand with some quail feathers on it. Over to the right is Kawahu. Kawahu is one of the favorite Kachinas for carvers, and he is very highly respected by the Hopi, and he appears in many of the dances during the summertime. He used to be carved with feathers, but now most of the carvers use wood to carve the feathers. Here are some miscellaneous Kachinas. Over here on your left, we have Kocha Mosaru, who is a buffalo dancer. He is not a real Kachina, but is a dancer in the non-Kachina ceremonies. You'll notice he carries a bow, a rattle, and then he's decorated with small seashells and a seashell around his neck. Now, the country that the Hopi live in, there are no seashells, and they're a long ways from the coast. But they used to trade with Indians in other parts of the country, grain and crops and things for objects like this. The one we have here in the middle, this little guy, is a mudhead, and he is called Tosin Koyemsi, and he's a sweet cornmeal mudhen, and he generally his job is to check on the children when they're grinding the cornmeal, and if it's good, then he rewards them, but if they do a bad job, then he turns them over to the ogres, and the ogres take them away and do things to them. Over to his right here is Telamupayaka, and he is a Zuni warrior. You'll notice he also has the beads, and he has two switches that he fights with, and he has a parrot on his helmet, and he also has little bells there that make nice sounds during the ceremonies. The Kachina over here on the left is a warrior Kachina, or no, he's a hunter. Yeah, he's a hunter, and he's called Siyang Gifoya, and he's also referred to as the left-hand Kachina. Now, most of the hunters are generally made like clowns, and they, like you notice, his tongue sticking out. And, he does have his weapons. He has a bow and a boomerang, which is common in that part of the country. And over here on our right, we have Sotunangu, and he's a weather Kachina. And they are very important, and his job is to ensure that that no thunderstorm, lightning, hail will bother the crops that they're planting. In this program, we have shown you a number of Kachinas. There are many more, and if you ever go through the Southwest, you'll have an opportunity to see many, many more, because there are Kachinas for almost every form of life, because everything is important to them, and they like to include even insects in their ceremonies, because everything is important to the Hopi. For any of you who have become intrigued with Kachinas, here are some books that I think are very excellent references. This book here, Hopi Kachina, is a complete guide to collecting Kachina dolls. There's many pictures, and many of the Kachinas that you've seen today appear in the book. It's an excellent reference. Here's another good book on Kachinas that shows many colored plates and describes some of the dancer type Kachinas that you commonly see throughout Arizona and New Mexico. It has very excellent illustrations. Welcome to my workshop. This is where I do all of my wood carving, making Kachinas and birds and ducks and what have you. And here I'd like to show you how we start a Kachina, the early stages. First, you start with a block of wood, preferably a piece of cottonwood root. And then the first thing that's done, you have to scrape off, using a draw knife like this, to scrape off all the bark and get down to the wood. The important thing in carving a Kachina, you don't want a lot of knots, because if you have a lot of knots, then you have difficulty carving it. And normally a cottonwood root has no knots at all, because there are no limbs on a root. And so therefore, you have a very good wood to carve from. But the first thing you do is you make basic cuts with a handsaw, just a typical handsaw that everyone has in their workshop. And then using chisels and rasps, you make out the basic shape. Now this particular one that I'm working on now will be the Eagle Kachina. And you notice the head beginning to form. I'm starting to get to the chest. Well, I've got a lot of work left to do, a lot of carving left to do. Now in order to make the legs, we take this block of wood and we make saw cuts. down like this, and chisel out there, and then we make a cut along here, and a cut along there, and there we have the basis for legs. Now what I'll do later on is I'll cut back like this with a saw like this, to make the leg like this, and then using a pocket knife, various files, and chisels, I'll work it down to size, and then it will be sanded off. Now the arms are cut out from separate pieces of wood, and then they are attached to the shoulders for little dowels. And also the beak that will come out here. And that basically is the type of work that's required to make a kachina. It requires simple tools, but a lot of hard work. And the most important thing is using big tools like the draw knife and the chisels to get down to the rough, get rid of as much wood as you possibly can, and then eventually you'll get down to a bird that looks like that you can be proud of. Now, I also carve birds. Here's a quail, and here's a typical eastern blue jay, and also a seagull. And they're done quite differently than the way we carve kachinas. The way I do it, I take a piece of 1x6, and first I have a pattern like this that shows the shape of the bird. Then I trace that on a block of wood like this, and first I'll cut it out like this, then using my bandsaw I'll make the basic cuts. And for a quail who's quite thick, it takes 3 pieces like this, and then we glue them together, and the carving is done with just ordinary knives. Knives like these X-Acto knives to get it down to shape, and then sanded, and all the other little details are made in, which is takes a lot more work than it does in carving a kachina. It's a much different type of work. And that gives you just a brief idea of what wood carving is all about. It's a lot of work and a lot of chips, but eventually you get something you can be proud of.